Yep, as Rich said, I'm basically a design engineer at Atlassian, the design engineer. Bit of an oxymoron. Basically, I'm responsible for integrating between the design team and the developers themselves. I'm sort of a bit of a designer, a bit of front-ender as well, predominantly HTML, CSS. I don't really touch the JavaScript. I leave that to far cleverer people than me. Been with the company for about 4.5 years. So when I joined, that was pretty much when Owie was born. So at the time, and at Atlassian, that was 2008, there were 3 front-enders. So there was myself, a guy called Lachlan, and Dmitry Baranovsky, who was doing the JavaScript. And so in the time between then and now, we've built to probably, well, we're rapidly approaching 40 front-enders across the company. So we're huge, huge increase in numbers. Ooh, that just got really loud. So throughout my life, I've been compared to various people. One of them is Jamie Oliver, Pucker Jubbly. The other one is Hugh Laurie. Now, not so much in his later years as House. It's all falling apart. More the earlier years as the Prince Regent. So I was struggling to find a way of combining HTML and CSS with Lupus. So I am afraid I have resorted back to Jamie Oliver. So we're going to run with Sharpie's 30-minute plugin party. Here's my carefully prepared prop, which John bought for me. The wonders of Amazon overnight delivery. Fantastic stuff. I can't promise to wear this the whole way through, but I'll do my best, John. So what's our plugin party going to consist of? Well, our main ingredient, we're going to be using JIRA patterns. There's some really, really simple markup patterns that we have in JIRA that you guys can leverage. It's very, very simple code, and it just gives your plugins a JIRA look and feel. Very, very simple, very easy to implement, and reliable, hopefully. What else are we going to be using? Owie components. Owie at the moment is going through a massive resurgence. As Sam mentioned earlier with the Atlassian design guidelines that have just come out. Owie's getting a bit of a kick as well. We're doing our best to implement the current HTML and just restyle that pertinent to the new guidelines. But there are going to have to be some slight markup changes which you will have to be aware of. I can't give them to you at the moment because we're changing on a daily basis. But very, very soon, if you keep going to the page, there'll be a URL at the end. Keep your eyes on that, and you'll be up to speed. As far as JIRA goes, there's 1 or 2 very, very minor changes, but they're not huge, so we should be fine. What else are we going to use? Origin namespacing, as far as your CSS goes. Origin namespacing, this is probably the biggest takeaway that I want you to get from this. When you're writing your CSS, putting the name of your plugin as a class on the front. Very, very important for various reasons that I'll go into later on. What do we get out of that? Main ingredient, bacon. Everybody loves bacon. Right, so let's start the party off. We need a venue for our party. This is quite a nice venue. Layout. Now, this markup pattern has been in JIRA for a couple of releases now, and it's also going into Owie now, so you'll be able to leverage that in other products like Confluence. Really, really simple grouping. So if you want some columns, use this. Put an Owie group around your container. As many Owie items as you want. It'll sort out the widths automatically. So if you have 2 in there, you get 50% width. If you've got 3, 33%. It does it all for you. It's much simpler than Twitter's Bootstrap, where you have to think about things and you have to have sort of span 12 and all this sort of stuff. So this is really reliable. If you want to keep one of those columns that are fixed width, you're more than welcome to put a class on there, fix the width in your CSS, and it's fine. It'll look after itself. What else have we got? We're going to have to set up a bar tab for our party. Tabs, seriously, the puns get no better. I apologize. I think I was a bit delirious when I wrote this. Tabs, you see them in JIRA all over the place. You can have horizontal tabs, you can have vertical tabs. It's exactly the same markup. The HTML is identical. All you're doing there is changing the class name. Now, I've got a little something I'll show you later on which illustrates this quite nicely. It's a very, very simple pattern. You've just got an unordered list and a panel, works it all out for you. There it is. Very, very simple. So where's my little laser? There we go. That's the class that you'll be changing. Apart from that, it's all identical. Toolbar. Toolbars all over the place. Owie's had them for a very long time. You'll see them in Confluence. You'll see them in JIRA. You can put drop-downs in them. We've got active states. We've got disabled states. as many as you like. You can split them, so if you want something over this side of the page and something over that side of the page, you can work that out just using class names. What else do we need? The module. Now, JIRA's had a module markup pattern since 4.1, actually, no, 4.0 probably. I put that in when we sorted out the projects page. Very, very simple structure. It just consists of a container, header, and a body. You can pretty much put anything in there, very much like the item details, not item details, the layout. Treat them as containers. Try not to put any sort of styling on the containers themselves. So try not to style the module with borders or anything like that, because there's the potential for breaking the styling, but put anything you like inside there and style that up. The basic module is what you've seen in JIRA all along. Just got the line through the middle. The design of this is changing in the PDL. Sorry, I keep calling it the PDL. The name changed last week, the Atlassian guidelines, design guidelines. It will be changing slightly, but the markup's the same, so you don't have to worry about that. There's a more advanced version of the module which we use in JIRA, which has a little sort of arrow and Twixify so you can open and close the content of it. And it's also got operations on the right-hand side. The code's a bit more extensive for that, so I'm not going to trouble you with all of that in this. Again, I can show you that later on. But it's a very simple structure. Right, got the venue sorted out. We need some guests for our party. Let's select some guests. Do we have an intimate party? Is it a one-on-one? Are we just having candlelit dinner? Let's go with a single select. I'm not going to go too deeply in these because Jonathan did a fantastic job talking about these yesterday. But the markup's the same for the single select, the multi-select if you're having a larger party. These wonderful, gorgeous little lozenges. I love them. I think this sort of markup pattern first started appearing, I think LinkedIn were one of the first sites to use it, and we kind of borrowed it. And the checkbox select, which is new and shiny and sparkly. And it's actually known as the sparkler internally. What else with the guests? So we want to get a message out to our guests. Aui's had messaging for quite a long time now. Very, very simple structure. You know, it's just the message on that previous page. Sorry, let's go back. There we go. So here, that's obviously a success message. So you'd be changing this class to success. And the icon, you just change that to icon success. There's successful messages, warning messages, danger, alerts, all sorts of things. Dialogues. JIRA's got its own particular dialogue as well as Aui dialogues. Aui dialogues, you've seen screen grabs of a few of them in various presentations. They've got the menu on the left-hand side that highlights blue. That dialogue, it's very, very powerful and great if you like playing around with things in the DOM because it's fully JavaScript enabled. The JIRA dialogue's slightly different. It basically pulls in velocity macro. So you can put all sorts of stuff in there, and it's basically just a URL that you hinge to, and you put a class on it, and it'll open as a dialogue. So it's pretty flexible. And the inline dialogues, which are really good for keeping contextual information around something. This one's in Aui as well. So. Okay, let's work on our menu. Drop-downs. I really couldn't think of anything funny about drop-downs for menu. So, this is actually our new drop-down. This is called drop-down 2 in Aui. It's just a little bit more styled than the current drop-down that you might see in JIRA. It's just a little bit funkier, and you can also group things together in there, so you can give them group headings. We've put in a little bit of styling to handle really, really long strings of text, so we ellipsify everything when it reaches a certain limit. Thankfully, now that we've been able to drop support for IE6 and IE7 and things like that, it's making our styling a lot more robust and a lot friendlier. We need to formulate. They don't get any better. They really don't. Formulate courses. So forms are forms. I mean, I don't need to show you forms. I can in a minute, but huge, big forms elements. Lots and lots of options there. Aui's had forms since the day dot. I know, I wrote them, and I apologize for the original forms because they were horrible. Buttons. JIRA's had its own button styling for a couple of releases now, just to sort of make them a little bit sexier, and they've got a nice little gradient background. And again, since we dropped support for 6 and 7 in IE, we can now style those buttons up a little more consistency, whereas before we kind of shied away from styling buttons and inputs and things like that because it was just very inconsistent across browsers, and so we tended to resort to just the native browser browser buttons, but now that we can do that, we can get much nicer buttons. You can't see the gradient in the screen grab, unfortunately, but it's there. With the new Atlassian guidelines, I don't know, does anybody here use the owie button in their plugin? Right, cool. That's good, actually. That's nice. So you will need to be aware of this. So the current implementation in JIRA uses a class of owie button cancel. In the new guidelines, that's actually been superseded by owie button link. So you will need to put that class in to get it to style correctly. It'll still look reasonably all right, but you will need to put that in. Now, if you do use that class together with the owie button class, you can put it on a button element, you can put it on an input element, and it'll still style it to look like a link. That's kind of the whole point of it. The disabled states that you see down there, previously we've been using a disabled class. We're actually moving more towards the ARIA disabled attribute, purely for accessibility reasons. We can style that up perfectly well, and it just means that screen readers and things like that have a much better time of handling what's going on. Okay, wrong one, there we go. And it's dead easy to implement. You just stick a class on a button, you're done. Right, item details. Quite often you want to pair up information, have a title, description. You can put more than one description in the things. It's a very, very simple markup. It seems a little bit heavy-handed, having several layers of container. This is pretty much just to give us hooks so that we can style it up more effectively. So if you whack an extra class on there, we can then perhaps style the LIs, because you could have multiple LIs, you could have, you know, it's flexible, but we don't want to make it too flexible. As long as you stick to that structure, it'll work perfectly well. And a little bit later on, just remember this a little bit, because when I cover very briefly sort of responsive layouts and things like that, this is something that I'll refer to. Right, let's lay the table. Tables. Everybody knows tables. Tables are everywhere. Owie's had tables for a very long time. They don't have a native row hover in Owie tables, so JIRA itself, we've implemented an Owie table row hover class. So if you're using it in JIRA and you want the table to get a grey background when you hover over the rows, stick that class in and it'll handle it for you. Now, as long as you stick to the structure of the T-head with THs and the T-body, then you're not going to have any problems with the styling. But please try and do stick to that. I mean, for correct markup, you want the T-head and the T-body anyway. You'll notice that we've got a couple of attributes in there. Oh, wrong one. There we go. So we've got the headers in there. You don't need to have the headers attributes in there. Again, they're purely for accessibility. Give screen readers a much better time of navigating around tables when people with vision impairment are trying to read them. Okay, let's move on to the party. Show hide. So JIRA's had a little, we call it a Twixie. So it's basically this little fella here. So you might see that hanging around in various different places. Really easy code to do that. If you want to have a large block of content, stick it in here, and you can show and hide that content. It's stored in a cookie, so it's based on session, but it's at least it won't all open all the time when you keep going back to that page. Be careful when you're using this, because it's not generally a good idea to hide content from people. But if you, I was talking to, I think it's Roberto or somebody yesterday, and you know, sometimes you just got huge, huge amounts of information on a page, like stack traces or something like that, and it's a good idea to enable people to close those up so that the page isn't cluttered with lots and lots and lots of unnecessary information. But be careful with it. Don't hide anything important inside one of these things. Every party has special food requirements. You know, there's always somebody that has some dietary requirement or something. The internet is no different. We all know who it is. So previously, we've you know, there's been various different ways of coping with browser differences in the way that they render their content. Now, you know, traditionally we've relied on conditional comments and things like that in the header just to sort of serve up different style sheets and things like that. In JIRA, for a little while now, we've had our own way of doing things. It's just a tiny little bit of JavaScript, which we just do a bit of a sniff when we load the page up. Based on the browser that we're serving to, we'll then add a class in the HTML tag relative to that browser, or in the case of IE, a series of classes to let us target the specific browser itself. This is really, really useful and really powerful for us because it means that we can, when we're writing when we're doing our styling and stuff, do a bit of a debug, bit of a decode, and if we need to, we can just specifically target an individual browser with overrides for that. And the wonderful thing about this is that, especially if you're using something like less or something, which we'll talk about later on, you can keep all these things in one place, and when you drop browser support for IE8, you just delete all those particular overrides. It's great. Right, you may have to hover over your users, make sure the drink's topped up and everything. I'm going to get better. User hover. You can see I just started playing around with Keynote and just every single animation I could find. It's fantastic. A lot of Atlassian products have this. JIRA's got the little, it does get louder when I do that, doesn't it? JIRA's got the little sort of time zone stuff in there as well. JIRA 9 for the win. Gives you access to lots of information. It's really, really, really simple to implement. You just basically have a href to the user profile, drop in the user's name and a rel attribute with the username in there, and then stick it in your product. When you hover over it, you'll get that for free. It's a lovely little bit of pizzazz that will just wow and amaze your customers or your bosses or whoever it is you're building for. Right, may have some famous guests coming. You may deal with media queries. Or what Peggy said. She covered it off far better. But when it comes to something like JIRA, we're not a mobile device or platform. I mean, we're quite a complex web application, and it's never going to be easily navigable on a mobile. So, bear that in mind if you're building something for it, because it's just not really worth it, to be honest. But what we can do for sort of limited browser resolutions, we can move things around a little bit using media queries. So going back to the example of the item details where you've got a title on the left, some information on the right, you'll actually see in sort of versions of JIRA coming out soon, we do use media queries for a little bit of responsiveness. So currently we have the title and the description next to each other. When the browser's pulled in to be slightly narrower, we then pop the title above. It's not really rocket science, and it's not particularly advanced or exciting, but it just aids the ability for people to use it on smaller screens, because not everybody has a massive 24-inch monitor. There are still a lot of people using our products who are stuck on a 1024 by 768 resolution. Right, this is a big one. Place names, namespacing. Okay, this is the big takeaway if I can give one to you. When you're writing your CSS in your plugin, or your less or whatever, can you please try and hook that CSS to your plugin? So just whack a class name in front of all your declarations that's pertinent to your plugin. Really, really important, because it just prevents any unexpected problems with overriding core JIRA's styling. We've run into this problem a few times internally with internal plugins, especially when you're trying to override classes that are quite generic, things like error or something like that. If you use that class and you stick something like a bang important on the end, that will then give your styling to every single error class in JIRA, and it's a bit of a problem sometimes. So if you namespace, that will prevent that. And much as I hate using important, I personally am totally against it. If you have to use it to override sometimes, I mean, sometimes you do have to use it because maybe you're trying to manipulate something that's introduced via JavaScript. If you've got that namespacing on the front, it's not going to interfere with JIRA itself. So if you can, please make sure that you put a class name on the front. And when you're thinking about the class name that you want to give your plugin, can you try and make it quite specific rather than a sort of generic, couple of letters or something like that? Because, I mean, GH could be Greenhopper, or it could be GitHub. And so it just makes it easier for us to know where things are coming from. Less. Less is fantastic. Who here has heard of less? Anybody use it? fantastic. Okay, less, for those that don't know what it is it's CSS on steroids. It's basically, you will write your less file and you whack it through a compiler and it munges it all together, does some amazing things with it, and spits out a normal CSS file, but it enables you to do an awful lot of very powerful things as well. So you can use mixins and variables, for instance, which you can apply calculations to and things like that. To go into a bit more detail, a variable, for instance, is this fella here, gutter. So you declare this in one place in your less file, or even in a separate less file, and you can call that less file in. So you declare it in one place. We're going to give our gutter value 16 pixels. That's what we want to space things out at. It then means that wherever you are in your less file, you can just call in that variable, apply calculations to it if you need to. If you don't, just apply it wherever you need it. And it means that if you need to change that in the future, you get that for free. You change it in one place, and it sorts it all out for you. So in this instance, if you want to put, on the bottom of foo, we're putting a margin bottom of gutter times 2. We get a margin on the bottom of 32 pixels. It's fantastic. It's really, really powerful. It's great stuff. You can also do the same thing for mixins. Mixins are essentially, think of them like variables of class names, or classes. So you can apply a series of styles within your mixin, and then you can just call in that mixin, and it saves you applying all these styles to various things all over the place. I mean, in this instance, I've used border box, basically because as we go through and browsers start gaining support for native box sizing, we can start removing these as the browsers start to implement them. It means we only have to remove it in one place, and we don't have 5 or 6 declarations for the same thing cropping up all over the place in our CSS. Keeps it clean. It's just really useful. Let's clear up the party a little bit. This is important. Please don't use it. Okay, so we've heard a lot of talk from Sam and people about the Atlassian design guidelines. It's a really, really exciting change for us at Atlassian, because it starts to mean that the fruition of many years' work is really starting to be seen. As I say, we're really, really trying very, very hard to make it easy on you guys, so you don't have to make markup changes. But I can't promise that you won't have to. Keep your eyes on these 2 pages. Even if you just go to the design one at the top, there are links to the AUI one from there. This is the one source of truth for everything that we're doing on the design guidelines. And very, very important that you just keep your eyes on that. And literally in the next few weeks or days even. The iterations on AUI at the moment are so rapid that we're having trouble keeping up with them. It's amazing. The guys over in Sydney at the moment are doing a fantastic job on this, and I'm really excited about it, and I think you should be too. That in a nutshell is basically all I'm going to talk about on this. But I'm going to do a little 0.5 lightning talk right now, if that's okay with you guys. I know you're probably quite tired and you want to get home or something, or have a sandwich or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attempt to flip over to something that I've prepared for you guys. Okay. I'll drag it into the right screen. Okay. So this is a little something I've knocked up. I basically just want to gauge from you guys whether you think this is going to be useful for you or not. It's a plugin that I've built for JIRA, but there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't build it for going anywhere you like, that contains styling examples that will work in the plugin. So, for instance, we've got the user hover that we were talking about earlier. You hover over it, you get the information in there, that's all lovely. And then I've included the code to do it for you, so you can copy and paste that straight into your product. I've pretty much got everything that I've covered in this talk in there. So we've got the multi-select, we can start, there's no matches on there. What do we have matches for? Little creatures. We love little creatures. And there's the code for it. I mean, it's just really, really simple, copy and paste. All the examples are in there. We've got the browser styling, so I'm currently using Firefox. Browser styling, easy as. Is this something you'd find useful? Yeah? Cool, okay. In that case, I'll sort out getting it somewhere where you guys can use it. I may even open up the Bitbucket repo for you to have a look at, because this obviously uses the less and the various things that I've been talking about, and so it'll give you a chance to just dive into my less files and have a look and see how we've implemented various things. So you can kind of use it as a bit of a reference for whichever bit of the plugin that you want to be building. I'll talk to Rich and we'll try and work out a way of getting that information out to you. Okay. Okay, so by the sounds of it, we'll put it into the SDK for you. So, cool. Right, that's about it from me. Thank you very much for your time, and pucka jubbly.